Will Ukraine war create starvation deaths for the poor? Did you know, the relatively small country of Ukraine is the leading exporter of sunflower oil in the world. Ukraine also is the second largest barley exporter of the world, third in rapeseed, and fourth in wheat, as well as corn. Most experts around the globe warn that there is a real possibility that the Russia-Ukraine war will cause 10 times more deaths in poorer nations of Africa than the war-torn Ukraine or Russia, due to food shortage and subsequent starvation, if the war continues for a long time. With the port of Odessa in Ukraine closed, and a war raging all over the country, most of the harvested grains are unavailable to be exported to the rest of the world. The only means of transport is through trains, where the grains get shipped to Poland and Romania, but as we all know, it's not feasible to use trains as alternate modes of transportation to ships. Russia, on the other hand, is the largest wheat exporter of the world, with 20 million tons, the second largest exporter of sunflower oil and seeds, and is in the top 3 in the world in exports of barley, corn, and other grains. Due to the sanctions imposed on Russia, there is a large-scale disruption of exports of many products, including food grains. Russia and Ukraine were rightly regarded as the breadbaskets of the world, due to their enormous food production and exports. They literally supplied so much of food all around the globe, including the UN's World Food Programme, to help the needy around the world. As of early May 2022, the war between the two countries is in full swing, with neither side willing to buckle down, and with the West providing military support to Ukraine, there is a serious threat that the war will continue for a long time. When Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky spoke to Italy's parliament, he said that a famine could impact countries around the world if the war continues. Ukraine also blocked exports of certain agricultural products including cereals, and has also imposed regulations to export wheat and corn. Currently, due to Ukraine's inability to transport food within the country, there is scarcity of food in the southern and the eastern regions of Ukraine, including Mariupol and Odessa. This has led to serious consequences within Ukraine. If the war prolongs, the world is very likely to see a serious food crisis, leading to starvation and deaths, mainly in the poorer nations of the world. The African nations will be the first ones to get hit hard. Akinwumi Adesina, president of African Development Bank, said, 1/3 of the cereal supply of East Africa comes from those two countries, Ukraine and Russia, and Egypt is badly affected. So is Algeria, Morocco, Somalia, and several other countries. So, if we don't manage this very quickly, it will actually destabilize the entire continent of Africa. The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres warned in March 2022 that the war in Ukraine is likely to lead to a global hunger crisis. Russia and Ukraine supplied about 30% of the world's wheat and barley before the war began in February 2022. Now, with the exports of both these countries have come down to a trickle, due to the war and the sanctions, it's going to have a huge impact on the food grain availability all around the world. UN has estimated that at least 20% to 30% crops would be left unharvested in Ukraine, due to the Russia-Ukraine war. Though Ukraine is a producer of food grains, it imports the machinery, diesel, and other farming necessities from outside. Ukraine also faces a labor shortage, due to the fact that many of the farmers are in the battlefield. The reduced grain exports will have a serious impact on the food availability to meet the demands in the immediate future. In 2019, Egypt, Turkey and Bangladesh bought more than 50% of Russia's wheat. As of 2021, Russia and Ukraine combined cover more than 70% of Egypt's imported wheat demand. Armenia, Mongolia, Kazakhstan, and Eritrea have imported virtually all of their wheat from Russia and Ukraine, and must find new sources. But they are competing against much larger buyers, including Turkey, Egypt, Bangladesh, and Iran. Most of Ukraine's grain exports are destined for Middle East and African countries, who depend heavily on imports. Last year, more than 40% of Ukraine's corn and wheat shipments have headed to Africa and the Middle Eastern nations. Ukrainian grains exports are currently limited to 500,000 tons a month, down from as much as 5 million tons before the war, a loss of $1.5 billion, the country's agriculture ministry says. Crops from Russia, the world's biggest exporter of wheat, are still flowing, but there are serious questions over delivery and payment for future cargoes. As of late April 2022, with Ukraine's inability to export corn in larger quantities, the United States became the main supplier of corn to the world, as Argentina's crop is a little away, and Brazil's crop is even further away to hit the markets. There is also plenty of uncertainty over South American exports, due to its weather conditions. As of May 2022, in the European Union, and in the United States, the grain silos are well stocked. However, in poor countries, the food crisis is showing up already, with no reserves left. There are several street protests in the Middle East, Africa, and other parts of Asia. And all these reduced supply leads to an increase in price. So, even if countries have access to food grains, the inflation in food prices is going to be very steep, affecting large sections of the world population. The drop in Ukraine's grain exports could increase international food and feed prices by 8% to 22%, above current levels, the UN said, which were already sharply elevated. The UN Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, said its food price index, which tracks monthly changes in international prices, for a basket of commodities, averaged 159.3 points in March 2022, up 12.6% from February, and is showing signs of further increase in the coming months. Joseph Schweuber, Deputy Director of FAO's Markets and Trade Division, said, as it is, the February index was the highest level since its inception in 1990. FAO said the war in Ukraine was largely responsible for the 17.1% rise in the price of grains, including wheat, and others like oats, barley, and corn. While there have not yet been global disruptions to wheat supplies, prices have surged 55% since a week before the invasion. India, Australia, and Brazil have agreed to contribute to fill the export shortage, though India and Brazil have only done limited exports in the past, due to their domestic needs. India has worked with many nations, since the war began, to meet up the demands of the world. The United States and Canada are also trying their level best to help. US corn was shipped to Spain, for the first time in a while. Argentina is also trying to pick up their production and exports. Despite all these efforts, the food scarcity caused by the war will be high, and the additional freight charges will only lead to higher costs, sometimes making them unaffordable. The scarcity is expected to be felt more and more starting June 2022, when the food storage starts running lower and lower. On top of all this, the farmers face a huge increase in costs of producing grains and other crops, due to increased costs in fertilizer prices. A large percentage of the ingredients needed to produce fertilizer comes from Russia, and the sanctions on Russia has made the production cost of the fertilizer go up significantly. There are three major components, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, in a fertilizer, which are abbreviated by the letters N, P, K. N is nitrogen, P is phosphorus, and K is potassium. Nitrogen in fertilizers is present in the form of nitrates or urea, or a combination of both. But the basic ingredient to produce nitrates is ammonia, which is done by a process of mixing nitrogen with hydrogen from natural gas, at high temperature and pressure. About 60% of the natural gas is used as raw material. Russia is the largest exporter of natural gas in the world. Phosphorus is found in fertilizer, in the form of phosphates, uses mined ores of phosphate rocks. Russia is the fourth largest producer of phosphorus. Potassium is found in fertilizer, in the form of either potassium sulfate, chloride, or nitrate, and is produced from potash rock. Russia is the second largest producer of potash. The prices of fertilizers have risen significantly since the war began, and is likely to increase much further, making the food crisis get more acute, if there is no quick end to the war. Let's hope the war gets over soon, and doesn't extend much longer. Thanks for watching.